Hello to the world and to the kingdom citizens. I greet you in the precious holy name of Yeshua Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach, who said in his word, John 8:32, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Hi, I'm Dr. John Curry, Ambassador Pan-African, and welcome to the Embassy of the Kingdom of Heaven on Earth. If you want to follow this podcast, please subscribe to JC Global Embassy TV 1. Ring the bell and hit the thumbs up button. Today I have a message for you, and I believe it's going to be a good message in the way that it should be received. I did a podcast roughly 2 years ago, and that podcast was entitled Group Work. Group Work. Whites need to do an assessment on themselves and stop blaming others for what's going on in America and throughout the world. I called it group work. Group work. Whites needs to do an assessment on themselves and stop blaming black people and deal with the consequences that they are the ones that keep the mess going all around the world. Right now, what we're going to see is individual work, and maybe one of these days we can get to some group work. I think the group work as a whole will cause things to change in America and throughout the world. Let's take a look at this clip.
No justice. No justice. Mr. Blake, thank you for having me, sir. It's an honor. Growing up in the mountains of North Carolina, I was taught racism. From as young as I can remember, I was told black people are violent. Black people are lazy. Black people are not as smart as white people. I remember my dad told me that black people are too lazy to work, and so they depend on welfare to live, and they sell drugs. 10 minutes after my dad said that to me, a man knocked on the door. I let him in. He handed my dad some money. My dad weighed out some marijuana and a few pills and handed it to that gentleman. And then we went to the store to buy some groceries. We didn't buy groceries with the money that man just handed my father. It was little yellow, blue, and green food coupons. So my dad is trying to teach me that black people are drug dealers on welfare while my dad was selling drugs out the living room, living on welfare. You see, he would tell me, son, I work very hard. I don't make enough money to provide for you kids. So that's why I sell these drugs. I just love you so much. And these food stamps, well, I pay my taxes. So I earn them. You see, the indoctrination begins at a very young age. We are taught without even knowing it, there are two Americas. Despite marijuana use with the black community and the white community at the same rate, the black community is arrested and convicted at a rate 3 times higher than white America. There are black Americans in prison right now serving 30 and 40-year sentences for marijuana, while corporations are becoming multi-billion-dollar businesses selling marijuana. There are two Americas. If a man broke in my house right now, and I shot that man in the back, albeit in my own house, I could not claim self-defense because I shot him in the back. But a police officer can shoot Jacob Blake in the back 7 times and still be at work. If that's okay with you, we are on different moral platforms. We are on different ethical existences if that's okay with you. There's two Americas. The America I grew up in says if you comply, everything will be okay. Well, for white America, that's true. But black America faces a very different reality. The use of force and the threat of the use of force is actually 4 times higher for police-initiated interactions. The America I grew up in will say, if you stop talking about racism, it'll go away. Well, for white America, that's true. Because as a white American, I don't have to think about my race. I'm not judged by my skin color. As soon as a potential employer meets me, as soon as a loan officer meets me, as someone that's coming to appraise my home for sale, don't judge me by my skin color. As a white American, I can completely forget about my race and even racism, so long as nobody talks about it. So then in my world, it won't exist. Well, I've decided enough of that. I'm here to call white America to task. I'm here to tell white America it's time to stand the hell up. Beside our fellow human beings, beside our fellow citizens, and it's time for white America to be part of the solution. I was raised by racists. I was taught how to be racist. So you can quit telling me that racism doesn't exist. You're a damn liar. I was raised in the belly of the beast. I was raised by racists, and now they hate me. I call that a glow up. I'm not here to speak for Black America, over Black America, at Black America. I'm here to speak to and at white America, and I'm screaming, wake the hell up. White supremacy is woven into the very fabric of this country. White supremacy bleeds from every pore of this country. In schools, we have standardized testing, but we don't have standardized resources. We don't have standardized opportunities. In hospitals, a black woman is more likely to die during childbirth at a rate 3 times higher than that of a white woman. In neighborhoods, power plants and ducts are more likely to be put up by a predominantly black neighborhood than a predominantly white neighborhood. At home, 22% of Black America lives in poverty, whereas only 9% of white America lives in poverty. White America loves black music, black trends, black culture, but kills black people at a rate 2.87 times higher than that of white people by police. All of these things will not change unless we tear down, I'm going to say that again, unless we tear down the system of white supremacy that has built them into existence. We cannot fix the current system, for it is not broken. This system is working exactly as it was intended. Passing laws will not change it. You cannot legislate morality. Black America has screamed tirelessly for decades about these injustices, while white America has turned a blind eye and a deaf ear. Well, I'm here to say no more. Change is coming. Revolution is coming. It's time to open your eyes, white America. White people make up nearly 60% of the American population, and the overwhelming majority of them refuse to even admit that racism exists. They think that there's a conspiracy against them by the government with zero evidence, but ignore the obvious systemic racism and oppression against Black America that's well documented. Well, I've made it my life's mission to call white America to task. Mr. Blake, Miss Austin, to all the families of victims of police brutality in this country, to all of those of you who wake up every day and deal with the system of white supremacy built to marginalize you, I say to you this one thing. I will stand with you. I will march with you. I will protest with you. I will fight with you. I will use my privilege and my platform to demand that white America stop ignoring this humanitarian crisis happening right here in America. So, white America, this is your choice. Either be part of the solution, or by God, you are the problem. No justice, no peace. Thank you.
Grew up in apartheid South Africa as an English-speaking white boy. I only became politically conscious when I was already 18 years of age, because prior to that, I had been subjected to and sucked in this incredible propaganda of victimization of the white people, where every piece of news, every message we were getting, every joke, the butt of every joke was the stupidity of the black man, the inability of the black man to look after himself, never mind the country, to be ignorant, uneducated, break everything he touched. The messaging was that all violence was black violence, that all crime was black crime, that you had to fear black people. And a huge amount of that fear was that if we let them into the political process, into the governance of the country, that they would do to us exactly what we had done to them for decades, which would be to turn around and oppress us, to murder us, to take our stuff, to move into our houses. There was a very popular story that the ANC, prior to the 94 election, when it was still an illegal organization and Nelson Mandela was still in jail, and the armed wing was exiled to Zambia and Mozambique, Umkhonto we Sizwe, was that they promised all of our domestic servants that those servants would be given the house they worked in when the ANC ruled. And these stories were told amongst the whites to bolster our resolve never to let these black people run our country. And it was only when I became conscious of that from 18 onwards that I realized not only was this a terrible lie that was actually oppressing us as well as the people that we as a white nation, white minority, were oppressing, but that actually what happened subsequently from 1994 onwards was far more of a reflection of the nature of black South Africans than any fears we as white South Africans had been fed and believed, right? And I see direct parallels with what's happening in Palestine and Israel. We've been fed this bullshit of Israel as victim, of the Zionist government as defending, this idea that the entire Arab world wanted to wipe them off the map, when in fact, prior to the Nakba, prior to Palestine being given to Israel by the colonial powers, primarily Britain, many Jews lived very happily and harmoniously alongside Muslims and Christians within that region. They weren't oppressed there. They became the oppressor through the Zionist ambition of a few Israelis. The white government for many, many years in South Africa needed the violence of Umkhonto we Sizwe. They needed the odd bomb to go off. They needed terror attacks because it justified the further repression. And I've told stories about when I was in the South African Defence Force in 1987, 88, 89. The things that were done by the intelligence service to undermine the ANC and other liberation struggles and to pit black against black, to distract black people from action against the oppressive minority and the history of oppression. And it's time to step aside from what we've been told and look at the truth, look at the reality, look at the history, educate ourselves, and make a moral judgment based on our real values as a
I keep seeing people saying that this country is going backwards. And I want to say this country has barely ever moved forward. Slavery is still legal in the United States of America. Now they just put people in cages and force them to work for pennies for mega corporations. Many of our cities are still segregated due to redlining, and our rural parts of the country have sundown towns, which are places that Black people will not be safe in past a certain time at night. We still have lynchings of Black men and women that are covered up by the police and our government. I'm sure many of you haven't even heard the story of Khalil Azad, who is a Black man that was murdered and beaten by the police not 20 minutes from my house last summer, and I didn't even hear about this until now because they literally covered it up. Rasheem Carter was a Black man in Mississippi who was chased by white men in 3 trucks who were yelling racial slurs at him, and his body was found by his family decapitated because the police did not want to search for him and thought people wouldn't care. Wealth inequality is at its worst. The top 1% of Americans make 132 times more money than the bottom 99% of Americans. Our country is ruled by billionaires and corporations. Our country is a fascist country that commits genocide against Black and Indigenous people and constantly commits war crimes for interests in money, profit, oil. They're going to overturn ICWA, which protected Native children from being stolen from their tribes. If you are a white person who is not actively engaged in anti-racist work in this country and turning a blind eye to everything that's going on, you are actively racist and you are actively complicit in genocide. We need to be educating people in our communities. We need to be leveraging our privilege to impact policy changes that will benefit Black and Indigenous people. And we need to protest this tragic loss of life that continues to happen.
Working class and poor white Americans, I am talking to you. You need to wake up. The rich in power have always created a divide between poor white Americans and poor Americans of color, especially poor Black Americans. It's because they know that if the poor working class altogether united, they could no longer control them. This goes all the way back to when rich plantation owners reinforced the idea of white supremacy and created a racial divide among the poor class so that poor whites would stop asking for equality. It's been researched and proven to this day that poor white Americans will sacrifice their well-being in order to maintain a racial superiority. Examples are following the bootstrap mentality, denying systemic racism, voting Republican, and voting for big business. Those don't benefit you, but you still do it.
Please don't forget